My name is Danny McLean. I am Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library's writer-in-residence for 2020. And I'm so glad that you're here and excited to be joined by our illustrious panelists, all of whom work in publishing in different ways, either as writers or as people who work as publishers themselves or for publishing companies. What we're going to do is I'm going to take the first little bit just to read everyone's bios. If you saw an advertisement for this panel, you know who you get to hear from today, but I'll take a moment just to remind you who we'll be hearing from, and then we'll be having a conversation amongst ourselves. And then at the end, we'll open up to your questions and answers. So what I'd like for you to do, if you have questions as we go along, if you put those questions in the chat, this my little one running around. If you put those questions in the chat, then we'll address your questions at the end. So without further ado, let's get started. So with us today, we have Richard Hunt. Richard has a decades-long career in publishing, and I'll let him tell you a bit about that in a moment. But for now, I'll say that he is president and publisher of AdventureKEEN and former president and publisher of Emmis Books. Welcome, Richard. Thank you for being here.
Woohoo! Richard Hunt.
We also have, I mean, with that little bit of excitement, we'll go right to the voice who offered it. That was Kathy Y. Wilson. Kathy Y. Wilson is a multi-hyphenated nerd, a writer, teacher, closet poet, community worker, playwright, and sometimes, for the right audience, she will bust a rhyme. Known mostly as the author of the incendiary column, Your Negro Tour Guide, and the book of the same title, listeners nationwide know her for her National Public Radio commentaries on All Things Considered. Still more audiences know Wilson for the eponymous stage play adapted from her book. In September 2014, the Library Foundation of the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County named her its first ever writer-in-residence. She sometimes works on her next book, Dialysis Diaries, How Hattie McDaniel Taught Me to Pee Again. Welcome, Patty.
Sorry, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We're also today joined by Amy Dean. She is the editorial and marketing director for Blue Manatee Press, an independent children's book publisher here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Amy's varied background as an educator and bookseller provided the perfect foundation for developing children's literature, and there is nothing Amy loves more than creating enduring and meaningful content that encourages lifelong learning and the joy of reading. Amy holds a master's in education from Xavier University and a BA in English literature from Miami University. Amy is also a graduate of the Yale School of Management book publishing course and the Denver Publishing Institute. Amy, thanks so much for being here today.
I'm really excited to be here.
Wow, Amy, wow.
Wow, wow, wow.
You're accomplished.
Well, let's just say I've always liked books, and I knew this is what I wanted to do. So
good for you.
Steps.
So glad that you share that background with us today. And we're also joined by Sadara Burson. Sadara is a licensed professional counselor, certified professional counselor, supervisor, and master addiction counselor in the state of Georgia. She doesn't mention it in her bio, but she is a Cincinnati native.
Yes.
Yes. She has more than a decade of experience providing psychotherapy to children and adults who seek to better understand themselves and cope with the stressors of life. Her work focuses on family systems, substance abuse, trauma, depression, grief, and loss. She is the author of the children's books, Master Messiah and His Power to Choose, and Noble Nyella and Her Power to Create. So without further ado, let's actually start with you, Sadara. I have your books right here, and I'm such a fan. You know, I have a 4-year-old, and really from the time she was, I don't know, 18 months or 2, we have been reading these books together. I love them. So you're a psychotherapist. What made you decide to write a book, and what made self-publishing the right path for you?
Okay, so thank you for having me here first and foremost. But to answer the first question, what made me decide to write a book? When I was in graduate school, I had this aha moment about my own emotional maturity and the self-discovery process that I was on in school as I was preparing to clear space to help other people. During this process, I thought about how beautiful it would have been to be introduced to these concepts as a child and how that may have furthered my own emotional growth and development as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought it was important. So I decided then that I would write a few books with core themes that would help either other counselors and teachers or parents talk to their children about choosing how to respond to emotions and understanding the power of our thoughts and how it impacts our behavior and our overall quality of life. So that's what really pushed me to want to do it. It's just to try to introduce these topics to young people as soon as possible. In terms of why I chose to self-publish, I just wanted to learn everything I could about the process. I wanted to market through my own training and workshop platforms and get to know the people who purchase my books as I plan to write more. I wanted access to them, to market to them again in a very mom and pop kind of way. So I just decided I wanted full control over my work and the process. And I also might have had a little new writer, low self-esteem, and didn't want the scrutiny of a publisher.
Okay, that's real.
But I'd be open to working with a publisher in the future if that opportunity presented itself. But in that moment, that's what I decided to do and why.
That's really helpful. And I don't know if you saw Amy like furiously shaking her hands about like, you know, let's connect offline. And that's very exciting, making love connections here. So, I mean, Amy, what makes Blue Manatee Press the right fit for someone who wants to create a children's book? And if someone, I'm sure that you get unsolicited manuscripts all the time, but if you could share with folks, if someone has a great idea, what do they need to consider before they submit a proposal or a manuscript to you and your team?
Sure. Well, let me start with just a little bit about who we are and throw some sort of, definitions of what type of publisher we are. So we are an independent publisher, meaning that we're not one of the big 5 or I guess 3 now New York publishers, but we do follow a traditional model, which means that you do submit book proposals and they can come from an agent or they can be, as Danny called them, unsolicited, meaning that you're setting in your own submissions. And on our website at bluemanateepress.com, you will find extensive directions for how to do a submission proposal that would be successful for us. But to take that a little further, what makes us maybe a good fit if you're interested in publishing a children's board book or picture book would be, so our publisher and founder is Dr. John Hutton, and he is a practicing pediatrician and the director of the Reading and Literacy Discovery Center at Cincinnati Children's. I myself have a background in education before I went into publishing. So what that means is we are firmly rooted in developmental and literacy milestones for our books. So even beyond, the entertainment value of how great and wonderful children's books can be, we're also constantly thinking about how does this work for classroom use? What might make this attractive for, the library market? And then taking it one step further, or another step further, Blue Manatee Press used to be directly affiliated with the former Blue Manatee Children's Bookstore in the Oakley neighborhood here in Cincinnati. And while we have broken off from that branch of the business because we wanted to focus on publishing, what that means is I spent 6 years as an independent bookseller. So we have a really strong sense and connection with the indie bookstore market. That's who we love. That's who we work with. And it also kind of gives us a really good idea of not only what sells, what would a book buyer be interested in and carrying in their store, but also what are families attracted to. I saw it every day, what they gravitated towards. So we bring all of that knowledge to what we do here at Blue Manatee Press. And we are small, we're a small team, but we have national reach. We have a national distributor, meaning that our books are available wherever books are sold. But with a smaller team means a little more of a what I like to think of collaboration, a collaborative process. It is much more hands-on. We work and encourage a lot of new voices. We love working with debut authors and illustrators. So, you know, there is that, while we are still a publisher and it is still a business, you know, and we're going to help guide, you know, your position within the marketplace and make sure the book is the best it can be. There is a little more opportunity for a new author to, you know, speak up and say, hey, this is really important to me and I want to make sure my book reflects that particular component. Oh, sorry, I went on and on. But to finish the other part of that question of, so what should you do then if you wanted to submit to us and you're looking at our submission guidelines? If you go look at it, you'll see that they're kind of long and you might not know what everything means, and that's okay. But the two big things that I would say if you're looking to do a children's book, and again, I'm talking for us, we would be meaning board books, which are usually for our newborns to about age 3, and picture books, which are traditionally maybe ages 3 to 8, but can go beyond. One thing is do your research, do your homework, look at comp titles, look what are already out there, because odds are your idea, while great and maybe a fresh take, there's probably at least a somewhat of a version already out there. That's okay. But think about what makes yours better, or how are you updating that information or coming at it from a new angle, and kind of be prepared to present it that way. I really can't encourage you enough to do that kind of research. And then the other two for a board book or a picture book would be the read aloud quality. These books are meant to be read aloud. They are meant to be shared. So kind of definitely do that with your text, like practice reading it aloud. Does it have a nice flow? How is the rhythm, the cadence? Are there words that are going to kind of trip you up when you don't want to be tripped up in the read aloud? So those would be my two biggest pieces of advice would be comp titles and your read aloud quality.
I so appreciate that. As someone who reads a lot of books to my child, there are books that are a great concept, and you can understand why the book's sold, because it really is attractive to a parent. It's attractive to an adult. But when you read it to a kid, it's like, this isn't translating like the translating. And so I really appreciate that point. So Kathy Y. Wilson, so your book, Your Negro Tour Guide.
Danny, I never thought you would get tripped up on Negro.
I know, I did.
Usually that's for white people. They can't say the word. They can't say it because they want to say the other word.
Oh, that's not, I know. That's not what's going on. I was trying to get the subtitle. I was actually trying to make my way to the subtitle, which is
my bad.
Truths in Black and White. So it's a book of essays that was adapted from columns that you wrote while at City Beat.
Yep.
So what made you decide, having been a long-time columnist, a well-renowned journalist here in the city, what made you decide it was time for a book? And how did the project end up with Emmis Communications and in Richard's hands?
Okay, I'm so glad Richard Hunt is on this panel today. What a blessing he is to this whole region, really. This man is just an Energizer bunny, let me say that. Okay, I'm going to talk really fast because there's a lot with this book. This book is a lot. So it's actual columns. They are columns and not essays. And there's a difference. There's just a difference. Essays are more prosaic and can be narrative and highly philosophical, I think. And that column was just straight, hard-ass opinion, criticism, some narrative. I did everything in that column. Haiku. I matched King's I Have a Dream speech syllable for syllable with my version. It was called a bebop for MLK. So that's crazy thinking. That's all crazy. First of all, who would publish that? Who in the hell would even touch that? I didn't know. So my column premiered in 2000, and this was a long thing in the plans. I was a reporter at the Hamilton Journal News, Hamilton, where I was born. Daily newspaper, medium size. It serves all of Butler County. My publisher there gave me a column after every staff member had to write a column of introduction to the community. The publisher loved mine and came up and just told her, give her a column. And he didn't even know who I was. He was like, who is this Kathy Y. Wilson? And I sat right by the front door, like, you know, I was in the amen corner, like they had me like put her right there so people can see our diversity of one. And he walked past me and went to her and said, who is this Kathy Y. Wilson? Whoever she is, give her a column. All right. Sometimes white ignorance can pay off. Okay, so while I was at the Journal News, John Fox, who was then the founder and co-publisher and editor of Cincinnati City Beat, I was freelancing for City Beat on the side, and he kept telling me, I love your column up there in Hamilton. I want to get something like that here in City Beat. This went on for years. And I said, don't play with my emotions. You know, don't talk to me again about it until you have space. Fast forward, I quit the Journal News with about 2 months worth of vacation saved up, and they had to pay me out on that. Didn't have another job, went home and, you know, acted like a writer, wrote a lot of coffee, smoked a lot of cigarettes, went to a lot of coffee shops, talked a lot of trash. And John Fox called and said, we have redesigned the front of the newspaper. There's space for your column. Okay, so I'm at City Beat now full time. And he tells me to write evergreen columns, which are columns that are not time sensitive and can go at any time. I wrote 5 of those. The one that he used for my premiere column in 2000 was called The Big Red Machine. And it was about opening day, the Cincinnati Reds, and how all the white people on the number 11 bus from Madisonville sat in the front, and they all had on Reds regale, you know, paraphernalia and banners and Reds, and all the black people, the workers, and the field hands were sitting in the back of the bus. And so to me, the Reds, I use it as a metaphor for sports, as a metaphor for racial separation on public transportation. So goofy, who's going to publish that? All right, so 2 years, I got 2 years into this column. I go to John Fox and I said, I'm coming up on the 2nd anniversary of Your Negro Tour guide. There's a story behind the title, which I won't go into unless someone asks. And I said, let's publish a book. Let's just put them all together. And I'm thinking in my head, my sanctified imagination, John Fox is going to say, hell to the yes, let's do it. And then, you know, City Beat, that I could be like helping City Beat move into books, right? Have an imprint, book imprint. And then he looks at me and says, I'm not interested in that at all. But I know one guy who might be, his name is Richard Hunt, and he's with FNW. People in Cincinnati know FNW. Miss Rosenthal, who used to publish Story magazine and broke some huge writers back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. That family was behind FNW. Okay, he takes me to FNW. I do the whole new author kind of, you know, thing, meet all the people, meet some people, and we went through this. Listen to me, first time people wanting to publish books. We went through 3 or 4, perhaps 5 contracts with FNW alone. And that was Richard slow walking through the process of this one has this, but this contract doesn't have that. Let's try again. And I think there maybe was some shift in personnel. Then somebody would get and be like, I don't know what this is. I don't know who this is. Remind me again. Listen to me first time, people. Okay. If you go with any publisher that's not yourself, you may experience this. It's no need to panic or be traumatized by this. I was cool during the whole thing because I had prayed about it and I knew God was going to make it happen some kind of way. So then Richard, badass that he is, he does something happens with FNW. I don't know, he falls out or something. I don't know what happens, but he's a highly principled person. So I think they were doing something or saying some things. You know, it did get back to me that the head guy said, let's sign her, give her advance, and then we'll shelve the book and just pay her out, which publishers do first time people. They do. They will pay you that pittance, and then they'll just say, this is just a write-off. Like, we don't know what to do with this. We can't market this. We don't know where to sell this. And then, you know, I think Richard got his back up. Like, okay, hold on. And so then he went over to Emmis. Emmis publishers in America are known for Atlanta Monthly. I should know some others. But they are also mainly known for radio stations. So they owned a lot of big market radio stations on the eastern along the Eastern Coast, especially that big one in New York where all the rappers would have beef, whatever that station is, whatever that station is. So he went with them. They had never published books before, I don't think. And so he talked his way into being the book publisher. The beautiful, sexy thing about my story is that I live in Walnut Hills, and I can walk to the corner and look and see where Richard Hunt's office was when they were publishing my book. It's in an old firehouse on Madison Road, cat-a-corner from the dry cleaners there. So, this is like small town stuff, and that didn't bother me at all. I didn't feel the need to try to go to New York or Chicago or LA. So the book came out in February of 2004. February was my idea, Black History Month. I want to say that. A lot of the interior design of the book, I was shouting when Amy was talking, is my idea. The section to open up the whole chunk in the middle on Cincinnati and the riots, the way that looks with the mammy on the page and an introduction and a special title header for that section, that was my idea. The mammy on the cover was Richard's idea because we couldn't think of a cover image that was bold and that would speak for me. So that's my first mammy I ever bought on the cover. The American typewriter font on the cover, my idea. The crimson end papers on the inside. I don't know if that was my idea, but when the books came, they called me and opened up a crate and showed me the crimson red end papers. And that blew my mind. So these are all little, this is everything. This is everything in publishing, what it looks like, the trials of multiple contracts. Richard basically took me with him when he left FNW. And I'm glad I had that experience. I learned so much because there was marketing. Howard Cohen, whom I love to this day, did the PR. And along every signing, every little trip, every time I was with a folding table at the mall with a stack of my books, I learned something, and those people were in my ear giving me advice and tips. So if you think I am mouthy and loquacious now, you have that book to blame, because I really came out of myself, not so insular, selling that book. You have to grab people. You have to talk to people. You have to touch people. You have to make eye contact. And you have to treat the people who have 10 of your books headed to the cash register just like the person who's not going to buy your book at all, who's just interested.
Thank you, Kathy. There's a lot there. I think, Richard, what attracted you to Kathy's project? And also, what was your role as her editor and publisher? One thing that strikes me as I listen to her talk is that it also sounds like you were almost her agent, because this idea about contract negotiation, for me, my process in writing a book was my agent handled that. I was not in conversations about,
right.
So it sounds like you were like in the marketing and publicity piece. So if you could kind of break down this, why you wanted that project, why you liked it enough to take it with you when you left FNW, and then, how did you help midwife this book in all the various ways that you did?
I like that, midwife this book.
Well, there's a lot of history here. Kathy covered a whole bunch of it, and obviously she's a shrinking violet. So we had to find her to bring her forward. And the reason we were attracted to it, I was doing the book reviews for City Beat at that point, and I would read her column and listen to people talk about it. And she was stirring up enough public conversation. It felt like, because my background was only books, that we had to do a book. And we were wanting to find, I had been in New York and Boston for about 15 years, working at those big 5 publishers that Amy referred to, and realized that, they're really good and they have really good people, but they need a story that goes coast to coast. And they simply can't make that financial part work and all their overhead with what we might call community stories. And Kathy had a voice for the community, and we wanted to find a way to start publishing those books. FNW, especially within Story Magazine and Writer's Digest, is really good at working with writers of kind of all along the process there, but they didn't have that platform to be able to say, okay, this is a non-writing book. This is a book about issues.
Right.
And we were blessed to get a lot of FNW people to join us at Emmis. It was Jack Heffron, who was an editor of Story and Writer's Digest. Jessica Strouser, who was last year's writer in residence down at the library as well. Howard, who Kathy mentioned, Meg Cannon. We were able to bring people who had that background in books and make it, you know, I don't think we wanted to become Cincinnati's publisher, but we wanted to become a publisher for people who felt deeply about their community, either good or bad, or wanted ways to be able to, you know, start a conversation. And it's not always easy to start a conversation with book because it tends to be a solitary process, but there's a lot more weight when you put 200 pages together and you can read and feel the cumulative power of this voice coming forward. And that was all Kathy.
I want to jump in real quick. Richard Hunt rode his bicycle to downtown Cincinnati to meet me for that first meeting when I cold called him. He rode his bicycle to Redfish Grill on Race and 7th. And I saw him come in, or he was there, and I walked in, and he was, you know, kind of sweaty. It was a warm day. And I said, man, who is this sweaty little white dude? And what is he going to do with your Negro tour guide? And I sat down, and we sat across the table from one another. And some of the first words out of his mouth was, I want this book. I want to publish this book. And I'm getting goose flesh thinking about it now. And he told me, he sold me. I didn't pitch to him. He sold me. So I was like, where's the contract? Where do I sign my life away? I'm down for this. Sign me up.
That's a unique experience, right? That you're not pitching the editor or publisher, but they're coming to you. So Dara, one of the many reasons why I'm so glad that you're with us today is because I get a lot of people who come to the office hours or the different events that I host as writer in residence who say, I really want to self-publish. I'm not interested in trying to convince anybody else of the merits of this book. I want to control the process. And that really struck me with what you said, that you wanted to maintain the connection with your audience. I think that's really fascinating. Can you talk a bit about the what the process of self-publishing entails? How did you find an illustrator? What was it like? Did you control like actually laying out the pages, and did you do layout and design, printing, distribution, publicity? As much as you're able to share with us what that process looks like, please do.
Sure.
And also the costs, because a lot of people ask, how much it's going to cost me?
I did a lot of negotiating and piecemealing things together. So I met with a local publisher here in Atlanta. Well, she's let me say, she's not a publisher. She helps people self-publish, and she's an illustrator. So I asked her what her process was, what did she charge? And I think the starting was like $3,000. And at that time I was like, I'm just trying to figure this out for myself. I wasn't really ready to make that kind of an investment. And it wasn't huge, but it also wasn't small for someone just starting out and trying to figure out, what to do. So I decided I'm just gonna see what I can do on my own. And also with that particular publisher, her illustrations didn't speak to me. And so I just didn't think it was a good fit to move in that direction. So I literally talked to some friends, and I went on Upwork, and I found an illustrator on there. I did reach out to a couple of other people, but I just went ahead and decided to go to Upwork, and I negotiated with her to not do it by the hour, but per illustration. So that saved me some money. I then got a trick from a workshop to get all of my text, because I got an editor, and they usually charge you by the page. So I put everything on one page. I try to squish. I'm being real. I put it all
Hustle.
on one page to
Hustle. I
because I
see your
can
hustle.
separate it out myself.
I see your hustle.
I really did. I'm telling you guys, I'm giving you all the like
Yeah.
back end secrets. So I did that. And then I purchased my ISBN barcodes. I went straight to the ISBN website. And then I circled back to the illustrator and self-publisher. And I just asked her, once I got all my words and my illustrations together, would she help me with the layout? I didn't want to do that part. So she did that part for me. And she handed back the two files, the cover file and then the book file. Then I took that and I uploaded it in Ingrams Spark, which at the time is what I decided. There are lots of other platforms you all can choose to use. Mm-hmm. I chose Ingrams Spark. But prior to Ingrams Spark, I submitted the files that she gave me to the Library of Congress for the copyright. Mm-hmm. And yeah, uploaded them into Ingrams Spark, and that was it. So I can break down all of that, but all in all, it cost me about $808.
Wow.
For all of that to produce my book.
But then
my book.
Printed it and distributed it. So like mailing costs and printing costs, right?
So
or is it print on demand?
That's not including any marketing. That's just the process of getting the book edited, the illustrations.
Right.
Yeah. So like I could break down some of those fees. I think I paid the lady to do my layout like $300. I paid the illustrator like $315. You know, the ISBNs were like $20. So I nickeled and dimed it, but
yeah,
it was about $808 for one book just to put it together. And then of course, marketing and all the other stuff, that was a whole separate thing. So I didn't want to go into all of that, but that's just to put the book together and get it to a place where I could print it. And that also included the test prints that I sent to myself a couple of times, looked at it, made sure it was right. Before I start doing anything. And then one other trick that another friend of mine who's an author, who's a native of Cincinnati as well, was saying, you know, do pre-orders just to get to see what the interest was. And then I ordered at least that amount, if not more, once I saw what the pre-orders were looking like, to determine how much to buy to start the process. And then I went from there.
Super smart.
Wow.
I mean,
yeah.
I tried to put it in a nutshell because I didn't know how.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Explain it, but that's what I did.
Yeah, I learned something. See, that's the difference when you have a publisher to do all of that stuff, or there's a staff member to do all that stuff. Emmis was a small team, but these people were, you know, multitasking and spinning plates between my book and other books, but they didn't give me short shrift, though. They did not. And this was before the interweb was so far reaching and so big brother. I mean, we didn't have Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all those platforms. So I still have these oversized palm cards that we were producing with the mammy on the front, and then like, you know, Kathy Y. Wilson reading from, and then on the back, we would have like 6 or 7 dates and locations and times. And on the other side, there was a space if I wanted to mail those to people as invitations, but we were handing those out. And then they were big enough to put on like bulletin boards. I went to every coffee shop all over the city and just left a stack on tables. I'd just be putting them on tables.
I think it's an important point that typically, you know, the point of what Sadara is saying is that she wasn't just the creative force behind this. She took on all the business components as well. And so Amy, I want to turn to you. So your title is editorial and marketing director. What does that mean? What do you actually spend your days doing? And then I know that your team is fairly small, but tell us who else is on your team and how you all work together to put out books.
Sure. So yeah, I'll be real honest, my title changes sometimes depending on who I'm talking to. And what I mean by that is because, again, we are a small team. So yes, I'm the editorial and marketing director, which mostly means that I do the acquisitions of new titles. So that's contract negotiations, either with the author directly or their agent. It's also reading through, I spend time reading through all the new submissions. We get a lot. And I should have said that earlier. It takes a while for me to kind of cycle through all the submissions that I get on a daily basis. So, I would say for a picture book from start to finish in an ideal situation, it's about a 2-year, in a perfect world, it's a 2-year timeline. From me seeing your manuscript to going through any sort of contract negotiation to assigning an illustrator to it. That's another big misconception about children's books when they're doing the submission process. Sometimes the author is also an artist and they submit illustrations. That's fine. But if you are the author and not an artist, do not commission an illustrator. Do not do that. Because even if you send an artwork that's not yours, that with the manuscript, me as the publisher, part of my job is to assign an illustrator to it that I think might better serve the audience we're trying to reach. Maybe it's perhaps a little more professional, or we also work with a roster of illustrators and artists that I might just go to because we have a shorthand with. So if you are not the artist, do not commission an artist if you are submitting to a traditional publisher.
Okay.
Don't do that. So that's a big thing there. But so my day-to-day, it would be editing. So once we have the contracts are signed and I have the manuscript in front of me, working with the author to just fine-tune that text, making sure, going back to that read aloud cadence that I spoke to. The other big thing about children's books, and this ties in from an editorial side of things, but also the marketing, is, with children's books, the audience is a child, but the buyer is an adult. So you got to be thinking about, in your best case scenario, your best case approach is you're not, you don't want to talk down or dumb down your words. Being able to really speak to a child and engage with a child through your words is a gift. That is a talent. But then the marketing piece is, all right, so how do we sell this to the grown-up? How do we make them? So that's where we look into, all of our traditional sort of industry-facing methods, where you want to make sure we have print and digital advertising with, your big reviewers, Publishers Weekly, School Library Journal, forward reviews. There is something called the American Booksellers Association, ABA. Mm-hmm. They do what's called a white box mailing, and that's going to go to all of your bookstores around the country. And in there, we usually, when we have a new book coming up, we usually put either what's called, we do ARCs, which are advanced readers copies, meaning it's essentially a fully ready to go sample of the book. The difference for us would be a hardcover picture book. If we're sending out an ARC, it's probably going to be a printed on demand paperback version of what the picture book would be. But anyway, that mails out. We do award submissions. We do, now that social media is a piece of it, we reach out to just folks who have really strong social media presence, and to some degree, followers, but we're also looking for their content. So if we have a book that's about new parenthood, so for instance, one of our books that just came out in November, Baby Monster, are about two scientists who create a monster in their lab, and of course chaos ensues. But really it's a metaphor for new parenthood, and I think most parents would very much find themselves in this story. So part of the marketing is reaching out to, people who have, blogs or podcasts now are a thing, social media, Instagram, whatever, where maybe their focus is parenting. So we're also going to reach out to them to get that, and then there's also the production side of that. So that means working with the printer to schedule out the print run itself. There's the distribution side of that, which is we do have a distributor, Independent Publishers Group, and they're based in Chicago. And what they do for us is, because we're a smaller team, they help make sure that we have a national sales force, meaning we have sales reps that are going to accounts large and small across the country to sell our books. There are seasons in the book world. So there's a spring catalog, a fall catalog, and you would want to, whatever list your book is on, you do the sales for that. And then they're also, they do the coding for us. So so what gets the metadata that gets, I complete the metadata in terms of a book's jacket copy and the author bios and the all of the ISBN data that Sadara mentioned earlier, which is sort of like your book's thumbprint, if you think about it. All of that I give over to our distributor, and then they code all of that so it can show up on websites like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, IndieBound and Bookshop, and on the list goes. So the lifespan of the book for me is, it was submitted, I look at it, we go through the acquisitions, then you're in your editorial process where I'm working with the artist as well as the author to kind of get the best look for the book. One of the things that a lot of children's book authors, I think, initially might struggle with, especially if they've been taken writing classes and have been a writer for other genres and age groups, is a lot of times, we're trained, show, don't tell, give lots of description, describe what your character's wearing. And there's not as much need for that in a children's book. So sometimes it's paring down the book because the artwork is going to bring that to life. You don't want your artwork, you don't want your text and your artwork to be just the same thing. You want them to kind of elevate each other. So finding that balance. So that's a big part of the process. And in terms of marketing and what's called pre-publicity, so pre-pub, like what you're doing before, that would be like 6 months in advance of pub date is probably when that timeline would start. And then so you figure you got your production timeline behind that and your editorial timeline behind that and your acquisitions timeline behind that. You can see how it can take a little while.
Yeah.
And then once the book is out, it's full speed ahead with trying to get our authors on their local newspapers, morning shows, radio programs, getting them, once upon a time, in-person story time events. That's shifted a little more virtually to the moment. That's all me. That's what I do. And I do that for multiple books a year. Now I do have a team supporting me, of course, because, that's a little bit insane to try to do all of that and give my full attention, which is what I always try to do to each of our authors. So I also have supporting me. Obviously I have Dr. Hutton, who I mentioned earlier, who's our publisher, and he kind of just makes sure that everything's just moving forward as it should be, weighs in on, yes, that's a book we want to bring onto our list. That's a good fit for us. We have a sales outreach support manager. So what she does, her name's Courtney, and what she does is she provides a lot of the support materials that the IPG national team uses. So your publicity releases, or press releases, your sell sheets, those kinds of things. We do a lot of health literacy titles. So sometimes those need a little extra help explaining how that would sell in the mainstream market. So sometimes we provide little tips of how to talk about our books when needed. So she does that. And then we also work with a lot of nonprofits. And we partner with them because a real big mission for us is access to books and beginning reading day one. So we want to make sure all of, as many families as we can reach have access to books. So she also does a lot of our nonprofit sales and partnerships. We also have Chase, who's our marketing manager, and he does a lot of our digital marketing. So working with an author or artist to create a behind the scenes video or a time lapse video of them creating the character if they're the artist. We have a podcast actually, and he does that. And he's the one that also does a lot of our design materials for those print ads and digital ads with the larger publications. And then we usually always have a couple college interns with us who help us with the mass mailings that we have to do and keep things on track. Currently we have Astrid with us, and she's a design intern, so she helps with a lot of our graphics that we need. And then we also work with freelance designers who help doing like your actual print readiness. So all printers are going to have rules for the book has to be laid out in a certain way. And if the artist isn't someone that's hand lettering their text, we have to do text placement and making sure the layout works and is legible. So yeah, like I said, I know I just said a lot of things.
Very comprehensive. That's like the insiders look at what is happening behind closed doors.
Yeah, so I would just say, if I may, just two quick things. Patience. Patience is key. It does, if you want your book, the book world, for better or worse, is a slow moving industry in some respects. There's a lot of, steps involved. So try to have patience. And then the other thing I would say, especially when you're just starting out and maybe you are feeling a little less confident about what the submissions that you're putting out there, keep in mind that just because you might not hear back from someone, or you do hear back and it's a rejection, there are usually lots of reasons why that might happen that aren't necessarily a reflection that speaks inherently to the quality of what you're submitting. It may be that you've submitted a book about Santa, and I already have 4 Santa books lined up on my list. I don't need another one right now. And that might be the sole reason why we're not moving forward at this time. So I do just encourage you, definitely thinking about, just because you hear a no, or maybe don't hear anything back at all, that's not a reason to not move forward and find another path, another try.
That's really helpful advice. If you have questions, please share them in the chat. We're going to be moving into Q&A as soon as you share some questions. But in the meantime, Kathy, you're working on a new book. Are you thinking any differently about the writing and publishing process, given that this is your second time going through this? What is the first time that you're applying now?
Yeah, I learned a lot the first time. Richard Hunt used to tell me all the time, any book sale is a good book sale. So, I'd be walking down the street and some black grandmama in a beauty parlor would, baby, run out on the street, and I'd run home and get a book and sign it and give it to her, $15 or $20. She'd kiss me on the cheek, and I'd be like, that's a book sale. Yeah, this new book, it's really going to be different. And I was just thinking about it last night. So it's called the Dialysis Diaries, How Hattie McClain Taught Me to Pee Again, which is a crazy title. Danny, you know that I'm into subtitles. I love a good crazy subtitle. And it references, Hattie. It's going to be like Mammy, Your Negro Tour Guide. There's going to be a lot of questions about who is Hattie McDaniel. Because I've already had to answer that like 55,000 times. It's a literal journal. Everything's dated. The entries are all dated, but then there are going to be these little pauses in between the journal entries of just straight medical talk. And, literally scientifically what happens to your body when your kidneys fail, and then all that stuff about dialysis. And then there are going to be little crazy, funny profiles of nurses and doctors who laid hands on me, who cared for me. And then there's going to be some political talk about the ageism and the sexism and the racism within the medical industry complex. So it's going to be some memoir, some science writing, and then some just straight storytelling in journal form. And who's going to, like the first book, who's going to publish this? Who knows? I don't even have a publisher. But that doesn't, and I want people to hear this. Just because you don't have a publisher and or an agent, do not think about that. You got to write the book. You got to write the book. You got to have something to show people. You can't talk a publisher or an editor to death about something, or just write enough pages to show somebody because you have some dream of being published and having an editor or an agent and somebody to introduce you. How about you write the book, right? And then the more you get into the writing of it and exploring what form it's going to take and what it's going to look like, the more conversant you will be on your subject matter. So that's what I'm concentrating on right now. And I'm also waiting for an organic ending. On the night of July 1st, when I was watching murder mysteries and eating sour cherries on the couch, and the hospital called and say, "Come now, we may have a kidney for you." And I said, "Well, do I need an overnight bag, or y'all just, playing with a black woman right now?" She said, "Pack an overnight bag." So I thought that was going to be the end when I get the kidney, because I've been near death, hospitalized several times, poked and cut on, dialysis. That in itself is a story, those crazy black people. And then here's this kidney. Getting the kidney is not the end. I've discovered it's not the end. So I got to write and think until the end comes to me. And I'm not even thinking about a publisher. You and I have talked a little bit, and you have given me some tips and some insight. I'm such a prayerful person. I'm just so not worried about it. I just know it's going to happen. And that I can't, that's weird to tell somebody who's looking for, who do I call? Where do I go? What did you do? Like, I prayed.
Yeah. I want to put this to Richard because what Kathy described is not my experience. And I wonder, Richard, if you ever work with people who just wrote a book proposal. I always tell people who are writing nonfiction, don't write the book. In the same way that if you're pitching an article, don't write the article until you've had somebody buy it. This depends on your purposes. If you're trying to, it depends on how commercial you want to be about the whole thing. But my situation has been with a fiction book, you write the book, right? Like there's no but with nonfiction, did you ever have people come to you who had just written a proposal and were interested in whether you wanted to buy the idea? And then another thing I'm hoping that for you to address is tell us about AdventureKEEN. Like, what kind of books are you publishing these days, Richard?
And Danny, you're right. With fiction, you gotta deliver the whole thing and let the editor dive into it. With nonfiction, it tends to be a little more timely, and very often you need that advance so that you don't need your day job, so that you can throw yourself into this writing job for 12 hours a day. So very often it is, one or two chapters, pull out a table of contents, your background, and a synopsis to say, this is the book I want to write. Those things tend to be in the nonfiction area, unless we have a collection of, columns like Kathy's was. Enough material that you can start to work with and go back and forth. In terms of AdventureKEEN, we've stayed as a local publisher. We're many of the things that Amy mentioned, I would echo. We have submission guidelines. We're an independent publishers. We've published about 1,000 books so far. We've been around 55 years. And our niche, as it were, is still nonfiction. A lot of local resources, whether it be something like 60 hikes within 60 miles of Cincinnati or walking Cincinnati. We've done books on the outdoors, could be about the Red River Gorge or camping. But our notion is always what is surrounding that reader that they would want to take advantage of. And we've even developed stories through the bookstores. We have a couple of bookstores here in town called Groveling Point Books and Coffee, and we've helped local authors like Kristen and Maya do a book called Cincinnati Rock Tales about all the music that came and the musicians that came from Cincinnati and what their stories were. So we tend to work with authors in a lot of different ways. What's right to have their voice, what's right to tell their story. And the practices are much the same. We have about 38 different employees. We have offices in Birmingham, Alabama, and up in Minnesota, as well as here in Cincinnati, Covington. But the job responsibilities stay the same. Scale might be a little bit different, but our intention is to bring that author's story to a reading public.
Richard, someone, right as you were kind of sharing some of that, someone said, what is a good proposal framework or template? So could you just repeat what you offered as the nonfiction book proposal outline?
You'd want to write 1 or 2 sample chapters, usually your first 1 or 2 chapters that you'd imagine would be the hook for the reader, table of contents, your qualifications as a writer, your background, and your estimation of how long you think the project would take and why you as that writer have either the connections or the background or the commitment to see that project through, because writing is awfully hard work.
Yes, Lord. Yes.
And research.
Yes.
Research.
Praise hands.
And the research.
Praise hands. Yes.
We have time for one more question, which has come through. These are 2 different questions around self-publishing that I'm putting together. First, this person's wondering if anyone can speak to the process of self-publishing through Amazon and the pros or cons of doing that. I'm also going to throw this question out. It's kind of related. This person said, Sadara, thanks so much for sharing your process. Can you talk a bit more about the Ingrams Spark process? For example, do you have to pay Ingram to distribute your book to bookstores nationwide? Are you required to purchase a certain number of books up front, or is it print on demand?
So I don't know all the ins and outs about Amazon, but I chose not to do Amazon because of the cut and the cost sharing, and that I would not have access to know who it was that purchased my book. So that was one of the things that I decided Amazon wasn't right for me. So that's something you would kind of have to look at what they offer and then kind of make that decision between the different.
And also, Sadara, can I throw in one other little point on that?
Sure.
When you're trying to reach 2,500 to 3,000 independent bookstores, and it's their primary competition that's going to publish the book, it's hard to get those books into those stores.
That's a great point. So Amazon just wasn't a good fit for me. I chose Ingrams Spark because they did offer, you do pay them to help get it out there, and they can do ebook and they can do print books. And so that was attractive for me. And well, you can do ebooks and print books with Amazon as well. But I got to basically, I created my own website and I'm selling the books through there, and I can print on demand. I did not have to order a certain number of books. So that hopefully that answers your question, but they can do nationwide, and depending on how you code your ISBN, if you decide you want to do international, national, that will drive what you decide to do once you're inside of Ingram Spark, and you let them know, and then you can pay to have it distributed in that way, in that manner. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great. There's a question here about finding an agent. The question is, how do you find a literary agent that aligns with your personal brand and or your vision for your book? What are the benefits of using an agent versus finding an agent directly? I work with an agent, and I would say that the way that I connected with my agent is, so I'm a journalist, and that she actually approached me. She had read some of my writing, and she was wondering whether I had any book ideas and if I might be interested in representation. And then that just started. I didn't really have a firm book idea at that point. I had like some ideas I had been kicking around, but one of the things that I liked about her was that she, as she explained to me, a lot of agents will just take your book to market. They're just about selling your book and doing that kind of interfacing with the publishing company. And as she told me, I really have an eye for the editorial, and I will read your work and give you feedback. And that really was important to me because I knew that I would be writing about Black people, and I'm a Black woman in the publishing industry. And I knew that the chances that I would be working with a white editor and like a mostly non-Black marketing and publicity team, I needed to have someone on the business side who would tell me like, that doesn't work. Like, you're trying to reach Black people, and like, let's rethink this together. And so she's brilliant. I love her. Tanya McKinnon is her name, but she really sold me in that she said, I will do your business for you. I got that down pat. I've been doing this for decades, but I will also read your work and be honest with you. And so I really appreciate her for that reason. Now, I would say if you want to find an agent, the best thing to do is to look at your favorite books or books that are in the genre or the kind of on issues that you also want to write on, or just like your favorite writers, if your work is similar to what they're doing, and read their acknowledgement section and see who their agents are.
That's smart.
I mean, because it's a pretty opaque, like the literary world, the publishing world is completely opaque to me. Like I understand as I go, but there's no real way to kind of understand what's happening. And so I would say if you're curious who is an agent who might be a good advocate for me, who I might want to work with, look at books that are similar to what you're trying to produce and figure out who is the agent on this book and approach them. Yeah. With a letter or an email at this point, or on social media, whatever your
smart, very smart
means of communication is. I want to be sensitive to folks' time. This was advertised in some places as being from 2 to 4, but we at the library have found that now that we're doing things virtually, an hour is about all people can handle, which is no problem. Thank you so much for joining us today, all of you at home. Amy, Kathy, Sadara, Richard, thank you so much. This was
you're so welcome.
Oh, it's just so informative. I'm saying so way too many times.
That's okay.
This is very informative, and I think you have provided a real service to library folks who are with us today. Next week is the final event, the final Writer in Residence event of 2020. I'll be holding office hours on Friday afternoon at 4:00. It's all virtual at this point, so you can just look on the library's events page and figure out how to get a Zoom link to join us. And I do believe that's it. I want to thank everyone again. There are 40 of you at one point. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon. We could have been doing other things. Thanks for making time to join us.
Yeah.
Thanks, Danny.
A quick thank you from us at the library for Danny for all of the great work she's put into the residency this year. And we are looking forward to having Danny continue on with us for another year of her residency. And please be looking in your emails for a quick survey about the experience today. We really value your feedback, and we appreciate any feedback y'all can share with us. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Take care, everyone.